I'll call the June 8th, 2015 City Council meeting to order. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lori, the public announcements, do you want to go through those? Or they're just in here for people to...
They're just in there so people are aware of events that we have going on in town. I'll just quickly say that everyone is welcome to join us for the first 2015 Classic Cars Night, which is coming up this Wednesday. And then we also have information about a fun summer of movies in the park. Our first movie is on June 19th.
And tomorrow night, the library is hosting an event here in this chamber. Formerly local Fred Plocker, who's now had the common sense to spend winters in Arizona, wrote a book about, actually, it's all about local color. It's really has something to do with watermelons, and I won't give it away. But if anybody's free tomorrow night at 6:30, that'd be worth attending. Next, we have to adopt the agenda. There's one change to the agenda.
Yes, we'd like to remove the demo of Old City Hall and would propose to consider that as item C under old business. So that would be item I from the consent agenda. Move that to item C of new business, or old business, I'm sorry.
Okay, so done. Somebody want to make a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
I move that we adopt the amended agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We've adopted the amended agenda. The next item is the open forum. It's an opportunity for residents to address the council on subjects not on the current agenda. Anybody wish to address the council? Seeing none, we'll move to the visitors' presentation. Greg and Ann are here. Do you want to?
Sure. Greg Nybeck, the Executive Director of the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District, and Ann Helscher, who is Victoria's representative, are here tonight to give you an overview of their 2016 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Ann Helscher. You have appointed me to represent the city on the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District. I am one of 14 directors on that body, one from each of the 14 cities that surround the lake. Every year we come to you. You are our funding mechanism, all of you cities. We've tried really hard this year to keep ourselves in line and in fact have lowered our budget. So Mr. Nybeck, our executive director, has a nice little PowerPoint that he will go through. Let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council members, staff, Greg Nybeck with executive director since 1997, with the agency since 94. So I have been through a few years with regards to lake issues and budgets and a whole variety of topics. Any questions you may have during this presentation, please let me know. I'll try to do my best to answer your questions. Topics I thought we'd touch on tonight is just briefly the budget process, highlights of programs and activities. There's a variety of them going, but I wanted to hit on 3 of them, and then the budget itself, so I can hit the highlights on that. The budget process itself, the board, before we sent it out to the cities, we did have a discussion of it at a special meetings on the 22nd and the 13th of May. And then at that point, we did get approval, and the budget you probably have as part of your packet was sent out to the cities on the 15th. At that point, Lori had asked, us to come forward to the city council here tonight. We did have a meeting last Thursday, and usually it's lightly attended, and when we have a budget where there's a 10% decrease in the levy going out to the cities, the attendance was pretty, you could anticipate it was going to be lightly attended. This Wednesday night, we do have review and approval plan for the board here on the 10th, with a second review of it if needed, keeping in mind that some board members may actually go out to their cities, may want to have some other information where the board could consider further amendments to the budget. The reason why we do approval on the 10th rather than the 24th is that we want to make sure that in case if we get into a quorum situation, we want to make sure that we don't have to schedule a special meeting, because by statute we do have to have a copy of the budget to the cities by July 1. Programs and activities I wanted to go over. were qualified yacht clubs and sailing schools, boater safety ed program, which I actually made reference to a year ago. And then lastly is the strategic plan updates that we do have planned coming up here starting on Wednesday evening. Qualified yacht clubs and sailing schools. A year ago when I came forward, we talked about recently adopted ordinances for commercial marinas. We're going through a similar process on that, which commenced last August. And the first 3 bullet points there actually were approved for commercial marinas, extending the dock use area length out to 200 feet, exempting them from public amenities. Some of the public amenity requirements we have that are in current facilities are paid telephones and a variety of things, of course, which are a little bit dated. So we're going through trying to take care of those problematic ordinances. And then lastly, streamlining the process for minor changes where they could be processed within the office. The 2 new ones for the yacht clubs and the sailing school is to allow storage on land of an unlimited number of watercraft under 20 feet. Currently, we consider unrestricted watercraft anything under 16 feet. That ordinance goes back to the 1980s. The yacht clubs and sailing schools have asked for a little bit more liberty on that. I think the board at this time thinks it's a reasonable request. In fact, we may make that change lake-wide for all properties on the lake. And then establishing greater flexibility for the storage of motorized watercraft, either on land or in the water, that are used exclusively for safety, education, and coaching, or managing sailboat races. This ordinance is being prepared right now on the 24th of June. At this point, it looks like we're gonna go forward. After the meeting, at the end of this week, actually, I'm gonna try to get something out to the cities where you have the ability to provide comments, should you feel that's something you wanna do. And we're gonna have, not a public hearing, but a public meeting where the public would have the ability to come in and testify to it on the 24th of June. Lake Minnetonka Boater Safety Ed Program. This is where we actually work directly with presenters to secure Minnesota DNR Youth Operators Permit. That's the online test. Jay Soul from Allen Elmas, if you're familiar, he's the manager of Allen Elmas, has been doing this. We had 3 courses last year and we have 3 courses planned this year. It's been very successful. We partnered with the Sheriff's Water Patrol on that. We did have a course on March 14th, and coming up here shortly, we have courses planned for June 20th and June 22nd on a Saturday and a Monday. The attendees, whether 12 to 17 years in age, we've been asking for guardians to attend, and what it does is it's a long day to get through this test, so it keeps the focus for the youth, but also we found that guardians and adults could also learn from the materials that are being provided that day. The participants receive their youth operator's permit, subject to passing the test, knowledge of boating laws, key on board safe boating practices, and understanding and awareness of Lake Minnetonka's unique boating experience. Save the Lake is a fund where we actually go out and solicit money. Annually, we raise about $40,000 through that fund, and that's been fully sponsoring that and fully paying for that, including the online test fee. Here actually is from our last course over at the Mound West Tonka ESC. We had about 40 people there at the course. The room, you can see we got kids sitting on the ends of tables. Had to bring in some narrower chairs. So the good news is I think I got the numbers here. In this last course here, we had 23 youth and about 12 adults at this course, and everybody did pass the test. Coming up here, we do have additional 40 kids for the next 2 courses that are scheduled for it. So we think we found a niche here where there's interest in it. It's a very hard test, I think, for kids to take at home, online, and stay focused on it because it takes you several hours to get through the test. Picture on the top left is actually the class. On the bottom left, we've been working with the Mound West Tonka Mound Fire Department actually to show people how to properly use a fire extinguisher. And then lastly is Deputy John Piper there on the right. And the one thing there in the interactive breakout sessions, we've been trying to communicate to the kids that the Water Patrol are your friends, use them as a resource rather than thinking them not as the enemy. Strategic plan updates. We do have a current plan, but that was adopted back in 2009. No changes have been made to that since. The board did have a Saturday morning review session for about 4 hours. I think they made some slight progress, but what they identified then was, this is a pretty lengthy process, and we need to get a professional facilitator in. Thus, on Wednesday night, we are scheduled to review a contract with Craig Rapp. I believe he did some work here, I believe, with the city of Victoria. And the first session is also planned here this Wednesday night from 5:30 to 9:30. The thought process there is that we will work through the various sessions, then at some point we will come back to the cities and other stakeholders and get input on the plan that's put together on a draft basis. The budget highlights, as I made reference to here earlier, the levy, there is a 10.4% decrease in the levy, going from 306,000 down from 342 down to 306,000. From an expenditure standpoint, there's a 2.1% decrease from 582 down to 570. From personnel services, that's just slightly decreased, and it's really maintaining the same, down from 254, actually up from 254, 216, up to 254, 738. So it's just a slight increase. Office lease and storage, that was one of the good changes that we made here a few years ago, was at the old Mountain City Hall. We are down in the basement over there, and our lease costs, we do have a gross lease, and we're going up at a 2.5% increase on an annual basis. I think we're in year 2 right now, so then we have a 5 and a 5-year renewable on that. And then lastly, the harvesting program, there's a 10% decrease in the budget from the harvesting program from 2015 to 2016. So we're gonna decrease from 95,000 back to 85.5. And the thought process there is because of the whole bay or large-scale herbicide treatments, that there's probably fewer bays where we need to do harvesting. We're taking a trial situation here to see how that may or may not work. We're also gonna do some analysis here this year of maybe, we have 3 harvesters and a high-speed transport barge, and the thought process there is to experiment to find if we can keep a harvester sat down periodically, possibly the transport barge, to try to keep our costs down. The one thing that's actually encouraging on this is when I started with the agency in '94, our budget at that time was about $125,000. So about 20 years ago, we were spending 125. Now we're down to 95 in the current year and proposed 85.5 next year. Keep in mind now that does not include putting money aside for depreciated harvesting equipment. A $17,500 transfer from AIS and administration reserves for the equipment replacement fund. That is a $17,500 decrease from 2015. And what happened was with that savings of the $17,500 from the reserve funds, staff had proposed keeping it at $35,000, but the end result of the budget process was, rather than taking that $17,500 and putting it back in the reserve funds, the board had directed staff to go with a budget where that $17,500 would then actually decrease the levies out to the member cities. That's a big part of what's contributing to your decrease here this year. And then $30,000 for AIS prevention and management projects. That's the same, and generally that's been used for watercraft inspections. The recent levies dating back to 2008, the levy at that time was $318. We were at 342 here in the current year, and of course with the one, we're bringing it back closer down to that 318, trying to keep everything consistent and down for the cities, because we recognize the economic challenges that the cities face. For the city of Victoria, you actually would have a $913 decrease, decreasing from $23,344 to $22,431. It's a 3.9% decrease. The one thing that Victoria has going is we do the levies based on 2 things. One is the maximum we can levy is based on a percentage, 0.00242% of the taxable market value. We're well below that. But then we allocate it based on the percentage of net tax capacity, where one city can't pay greater than 20%. Your net tax capacity has been healthier probably than the other 13 cities on a percentage basis. So that's why probably rather than having a 10.4% decrease, you got the 3.9% decrease. Here is the state enabling legislation, which summarizes the budget funding of the agency. Goes back to Minnesota Statutes 103B. Again, as I made reference, the maximum levy is $472,000. We're well below that. And then the assessments based on the percentage of net tax capacity. Again, no city can pay greater than 20%. Minnetonka's into that category. City of Orono's getting very close to that category too. I'll take any questions you may have.
Council, questions?
I have questions that are more related to the lake and some of the treatments than the budget itself. Obviously, it's all interconnected. A little bit of aside from that, I'm curious what the purpose is of regulating the number of boats that are stored on land. I hadn't seen that before.
You're talking at the yacht clubs and the sailing schools?
Yes.
Let me think on this one here for a second. Anything right now greater than 16 feet in length is considered a restricted watercraft, and those are regulated per the code, whether they're in the water or on the land. And now they've asked us to, one, increase that up to 20 feet, and two, they want to make sure that by going from 16 feet to 20 feet, if an unrestricted watercraft is stored on land, that doesn't count towards the density.
So
I don't know if I answered that very well, I apologize.
well, I'm interested. I didn't realize there was a restriction on how many boats you could store on land. I understand docks and slips and things in the water, but I didn't realize there was a regulation on what could be stored on land, and I was curious what the purpose is of regulating
I
that.
think some of this, well, one, there's really 3 yacht clubs and sailing schools that could be affected by it. Upper Minnetonka Yacht Club in Shorewood, you've got Wayzata Yacht Club in Wayzata, and then you've got Minnetonka Yacht Club in Deep Haven. And especially 2 of those cities that I'm aware of, they're pretty actively involved from a conditional use permit standpoint. And I think some of that stuff actually may be regulated on the number of watercraft they can store not only in the water, but also on land. So it might be some of the situations, we may actually loosen the rules up, but they might have to go with the more restrictive municipal ordinance on that.
Okay, so in the interest of unifying it, just applied it across the whole lake, kind of to
Yeah, I
any
mean,
yacht
it's-
clubs
it's-
within the lake.
Correct. I mean,
Okay.
it's Shorewood Yacht Club is actually in the qualified, thought process behind the board there was to include them as qualified commercial marina, because they, in a lot of ways, actually function more like a marina than actually a yacht club or a sailing school.
I see. So then switching to AIS, the Eurasian water milfoil, and I'm been kind of casually following this with interest because the harvesting program, for as long as I've grown up around here, been on the lake, you always see them running around, but never really seems like there's less milfoil. And so to me, it feels like that may keep it at bay, but it's not really a solution. And so when I read about this whole bay treatment, this herbicide program, seemed like maybe there was a ray of hope. And the original report I read suggested that it was pretty successful, but perhaps not selective. So some of the native species were taken out along with the milfoil. So then it's kind of a balance of which is the lesser of 2 evils. No fewer native species or getting rid of the milfoil. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, or what your prognosis is going forward. Is that something that will expand to more of the lake? Is there?
It has somewhat. Keep in mind now, the LMCD, we participated in that 5-year study on 5 bays with the Lake Minnetonka Association, DNR, and a variety of other partners on that. And we got past that 5-year, and then the Lake Minnetonka Association wanted to make it an operational expense and keep moving it forward. And what they've done is they've taken the initiative to do the fundraising at the local level, as well as to go to municipalities. I know that's becoming a little bit more of a challenge, because the further you go out in these projects, it's more complicated to get fundraising efforts. St. Albans Bay, for example, though, they did establish a lake improvement district between the cities of like Excelsior and Greenwood, and they're implementing, I think, that taxable for 2016, I believe.
It seems intelligent to me that if you can shift the dollars from cutting it to preventing it from growing, you're having a bigger positive impact.
Keep in mind, when a whole day treatment on Lake Minnetonka costs about $60,000. We've got about 30 bays to take care of. Usually those whole day treatments last about 2 years.
Okay.
So economically, it's probably not feasible. Plus, there's also some larger bays where you got a lot more water movement and a lot deeper water that probably aren't characteristic for doing whole bay or large scale.
So long-term,
treatment. So we put a plan together, for example, a few years ago. I think we identified 8 bays on the lake that are suitable for whole bay or large scale herbicide treatments. In fact, I think the budget came back at that time where we had money put in for operational expenses for this and one without operational expenses. I believe the council here at that meeting actually supported doing it on an operational basis, but it did not get approved by the board at that time.
And if I can just add, Smithtown Bay is not one of those bays where it was deemed feasible to do that herbicide treatment. We're too open. I have talked to the St. Albans Bay people about doing get the taxing body, and there's some kind of barriers for us. We don't have lake access. We've got several communities where do you draw the lines, and we're really open. So I haven't stopped thinking about it. I agree with you. I think certainly lake owners and lake users are interested in tackling the problem. And I agree that getting those stakeholders to be more personally invested is probably the best way to go, with help from cities and the wider community, and I think there would be support for that. I don't think we have the right, I don't think we can make it work right now with what I'm seeing, but I'm certainly looking open to anything. And if I can just add about the harvesting, we've talked about this a lot on the board, and I think really the purpose of harvesting is safety and access. So keeping channels open, keeping access open. It's not really ever been, the goal has not been to keep the lake clear of milfoil. Unfortunately, it just can't do that. It's just to make sure that, you know, we can get through if an emergency, we need to get through to get boats from upper lake to lower lake through channels and things like that is really the goal of the harvesters.
Thank you. And then the last question is about zebra mussels, and if there's any lessons learned from what Christmas Lake's experience was that would be applied to Lake Minnetonka. I think
Christmas Lake had a setback on their experience here recently, so I think they're still doing more treatments.
I heard they had found a reinfestation at the boat launch, but went back and retreated it, and seemed like they felt like they had gotten it. They found more zebra mussels outside again, so there's really no the only silver bullet you have on zebra mussels is don't get them. So Zequinox, I don't know what they've been spending on that, but it's really, really, really expensive. Plus also they were putting potash in there and another chemical, copper, I forgot what exactly they were putting in there, but they've spent tens of thousands of dollars in there. And I think it would have been really wonderful if it could have worked, where they could have eradicated it. But I know the experience that I've always had over the years, milfoil, any other AIS, including zebra mussels, is the eradication is a very difficult thing to attain. Thank you. That's everything I had.
Other questions?
You asked all my questions.
Just one, for the interested layman, how would you characterize the degree of success that you're finding with the program? Are we winning? We keeping
On zebra mussels or
on infestations? Period.
I think we're doing pretty well. I mean, it's milfoil was here in '87.
And that now.
That's actually, we actually as an agency coordinated with the DNR and others, and that's actually when we held some forums back then, and that's actually what mechanical harvesting came out of, that was the best means to manage it on Lake Minnetonka. Then we established our AIS task force. Back then it was called the Eurasian Water Milfoil Task Force, and they advised the agency on mechanical harvesting and other management methods. So a lot of what we're talking about now on herbicide treatments is kind of a cycle, and and we actually started doing some of that stuff back in the early 1990s. Zebra mussels, I think we did pretty well to hold zebra mussels off as long as we did. I think the public does a good job. The watercraft inspections helped, and I think also we were probably a little bit lucky. But there's other invasives out there that we definitely don't want to get an introduction of. Hydrilla happens to be the one that would be real concerning, because they say the effect of hydrilla on a lake versus milfoil is much worse. It actually is from Florida right now. I think it's as close as Indiana right now.
Well, certainly, one of the things that everyone, didn't escape anybody's notice here is the 10.4% decrease in the levy. And anytime you're able to do something like that, the representatives of this city are going to applaud you. Again, assuming you can get your mission accomplished and do it as economically as possible, we applaud that.
And keep in mind now, the decrease that actually in the expenses so much was twofold. One, we had the decrease in the budget to the harvesting program of $9,500, and two, we have a better, the net on the expenses going out to the cities for watercraft inspections. The program is proposed at $40,000, but with grant funds of $24,000 planned from the DNR and the watershed district, and that expense out to the cities is $16,000. We've actually been budgeting for $30,000 on that in recent years. So those are really the two factors that contributed to bringing the expenses down.
Well done.
So,
Any other questions? Greg, thank you. Ann, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move to approve the consent agenda, which is now an amended consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the amended consent agenda, and just wanted to give a brief recitation of what's on here. Again, these are the items that are considered non-controversial, but nonetheless, just want to note what it is that we're approving. In addition to the minutes from the various workshops in the last council meeting, there's payment of the claims roster, liquor license renewals, sewer manhole cleaning and sealing, payment requests for the city hall and library projects. Demolition of the old city hall has been removed. Designation of the old city hall as structurally substandard, and sanitary sewer service assistance.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We've approved the amended consent agenda. Finance, the Fire Department Capital Equipment Fund update.
Thank you. We have Finance Director Kelly Grinnell and Fire Chief Andrew Hager to discuss the Fire Department Capital Equipment Fund. As you know, we took a brief tour of the fire station earlier this evening, and our goal tonight is really just to acquaint ourselves or to refamiliarize ourselves with the Fire Department's Capital Equipment Fund, and secondly, to begin discussing the potential sale of a fire truck. I'm not sure if Chief Hager will call on them at all, so I'll make note that Assistant Chief Aaron Jurek and Lieutenant Brady Lee are also joining us tonight for the discussion.
Anybody know what happened to Andrew?
Too many zeros.
In the nick of time.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Lori had mentioned, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to just bring an awareness to some of the items coming up for this fund. The city set up a Fire Department Capital Equipment Fund to accumulate resources so that as trucks and other equipment need to be replaced, we would have funds in place rather than having large items in our general fund budget. When we needed to replace them, we would slowly accumulate and have funds on hand, and then hopefully we can avoid borrowing as well. So right now we have transfers that come from the general fund for this fund. The transfer amount right now is $64,135, and that is the same amount as we're paying on a lease payment. I believe that goes through 2017. And then the funding is scheduled to increase back to $70,000 a year. That is the amount we had been funding it prior to the lease. And we actually decreased it a little bit just because we were looking to tighten up our levy and budget at the time. Lori and I met with Chief Hager to talk about the long-term needs for the department. and look at the capital improvement plan items. And we went out through 2030 because a lot of the trucks and equipment are in use for up to 20 years. So we wanted to really get a long-term look at everything. And if you look at the long-term schedule, the fund actually is in pretty good shape until we get to about year 2019. And then we have a couple more positive years, and then it starts to go negative again. So staff just wanted to bring up the subject of possibly increasing the transfer amount. It has not increased in some years, so we thought an increase in that each year would be appropriate, and we're asking for council direction on that. And then we wanted to talk about the specific items we have, and I will let Chief Hager talk about those, but among those is fire station build-out, and he can address that in depth. And then also one of the items to discuss is the possible sale of one of our tanker trucks. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew for an update on those items.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Like Kelly discussed there, we've got some challenges looking ahead on our CIP fund, and what we're trying to do is kind of get ahead of things here and see what we can do to correct those. The CIP fund, just a little history, was started in '92 by the city to put money away. And at that time, I think it was $75,000 a year was put away, and that has never changed until we actually decreased in 2012 to make the lease payment. On the other side of that, the average increase in a piece of fire apparatus right now in the market is 8 to 10% a year. So we've kind of been going backwards for a long time, and not keeping up with the cost of the equipment. We had a very good discussion, I think, a couple weeks ago with the Finance Committee about this to look at this fund, where it's going, what our options are, and stuff like that. So just briefly to run through what we're looking at for capital improvements over the next couple of years here is 2016, we have a command vehicle replacement, and then also what I threw in there is if this tanker sale goes through and it's something we're going to consider, we'd look at buying a pickup for basically a utility vehicle to kind of keep the seating capacity of that. 2018, we just kind of threw this in here this year to get it in the budget, but we'd be looking at the build out of that fire station, what we looked at tonight for that upstairs, the current training room, office area, stuff like that. 2019, we have replacement of our rescue truck at 20 years of age, and then also the replacement of our self-contained breathing apparatus, or our air packs, which would be 15 years at that age. I think we're looking $215,000 at that time for the SCBA's. We get out to 2022, 2023, that's where we could really run into some issues. We've got some engines that are slated to be replaced kind of at their 30-year mark. One of them would actually be well beyond the 30-year mark. If we keep going at 2022, we'd probably be at about 37 years on that. So, but as you can see, if we get into 2022, 2023, the fund takes quite a dip down. So, I guess any questions on the CIP fund part of it? Okay. So then the other idea we threw in here, we started looking at this. We were approached kind of with an opportunity by a neighboring city who was looking for a used truck. And we started looking at our fund, the number of calls, stuff like that. And I think we kind of have an opportunity here. We could help boost this fund. Right now we have 2 tanker trucks, and they were bought in 2005, 2006, both within about the same year. They're both very similar trucks. And what they're set up for basically is to haul water, and it covers portion of Lake Town Township that we provide services to, the Three Rivers Park District, and then the small portion of the city on the northern end of town that does not have city water available. So that's what those trucks are primarily used for. In 2005 and 2006, we had quite a different response structure than what we do now. And basically, if we had a fire, it was send everything we can, and then we call for help from the nearest city, and they send everything they can. What we started to see was that really started draining resources. We would go On the west end of town, we'd call Waconia, they'd send 4 trucks, then they didn't have anything to cover their city, they'd have to call Cologne to come fill their station, so it was a lot of backfilling of fire stations. The document you can see on the screen is what we call our box alarm assignment, and this went into effect just about a year ago, after 2 to 2.5 years of work and planning to get this done. But what this does for us is, and I didn't pull the map up, but it breaks our city up into 3 different quadrants basically. And if we have a structure fire in, I'll call it the north quadrant, it's gonna be an automatic start for Victoria right now. So every piece of Victoria apparatus that we can send is gonna respond. At the same time, if we get there and realize that incident's too big for us to handle, we're gonna escalate that to a second alarm assignment, we're calling it. And you can see on that sheet under second alarm in the north, what that's gonna do is it's gonna bring 1 truck from Chanhassen to stand by at our station to provide coverage for the rest of the city. It's gonna pull an engine from St. Bonnie to the scene, a ladder from Excelsior to the scene, and then it's gonna bring a life safety unit rehab trailer from Watertown to the scene. What it would also do if we were in an area without city water, it's gonna bring 4 tanker trucks with additional water in addition to our 1 or 2 that we have responding as well. So what this really does is it draws specific resources from 1 neighboring city instead of depleting their entire fleet. We're just basically pulling from a little bit further out to get the necessary resources. This keeps going all the way up to a 7th alarm assignment, but what it'll do is just keep pulling in additional resources, and it just keeps building basically on a ring or perimeter from the city all the way out. What we've really started to find that we're not, if Waconia has a big fire, we're not sending 2 tanker trucks to it anymore, we're sending 1. Just because they're drawing from, they're on the same program. The entire county is basically on a similar program to this. So everybody's kind of following the same guideline, and they're only gonna pull 1 truck from us instead of, in the past, maybe we sent 3. So that's one of the real drastic changes we've seen from 2005, 2006 when these 2 trucks were purchased. The next step that we're actually working on with this right now is basically an auto aid program, and we're gonna actually bump one of those vehicles in the 2nd alarm assignment up to the 1st alarm assignment. So if we get called for a structure fire, Chaska or Chanhassen or Waconia, depending on where it is gonna get called at the same time. It's gonna basically front load that incident and get us a lot more resources up front that hopefully we can minimize damage, life safety, anything like that on the front end. So that's kind of the next phase of this that we're building on right now. But this is the major thing that's really changed since 2005, 2006 when we bought those 2 trucks, and what it's really having an impact on now is our response and how we staff fires and send vehicles to it. So along with that, the 2 tankers we currently have are kind of on a declining use. I have a couple of numbers here I'll just throw out. Our 2 tankers basically go out in a response order. 1 goes before the other typically. So there's one that's more used than the other. But so far this year, the first one that would leave the station has been out 6 times. The other one's been out 1.
1?
1 time. And the only reason it went out is they just chose to take it instead of the other one. So it could be 7 and 0, realistically. If you go back to last year, the first one was out 6 times, the second one was out 3 times. So we're kind of, if you go back 5 years, they're dwindling from where they were. We were up at 10 to 12, somewhere in there. And a lot of it has to do with this program that you see in front of you. We've changed a little bit on how we pull a certain trailer we have. It used to be operated by one of these tankers. It's gone to a different vehicle now, so that need has kind of gone away as well. So
When the 2nd truck goes out, those 3 trips last year, was that as additional capacity behind the first one, or just, again, chose this one versus that one? Or were both needed on site at the same time?
1 out of those 3 would have been additional capacity.
Thank you.
So I threw a lot at you there. Any questions on this alarm response structure, how that operates?
Again, the net of that is that it essentially, in your mind, frees up one unit that is now available for sale potentially to the city of Chaska.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And we've done a lot of work looking at this. There's insurance implications that could go along with this. One of the things that we would do is, part of the sale, if it goes through, is basically require that that truck is available on an auto aid agreement with us, so that if we need it, it's coming back, you know, for our use, which they were more than receptive to as well, so.
Any suggestions on how we eliminate a $300,000 balance?
Well, I think this is a small step. We obviously have a lot more work to do, you know, looking at the CIP long-term, 7-8 years down the road. There's some things we're gonna look at as far as those trucks, you know, what do we really need to replace? What can we replace it with? Are there better alternatives? So we're gonna do some work on that, because obviously that fund, how it's laid out today, is not sustainable, so.
And you propose to have some additional answers through this 2016 budget cycle? Or is that too soon?
The 2016 budget is laid out as we're looking at it right now, so we'll have to make changes as we have more time and research, you know, going forward, but.
I think it would behoove you, this is the 2016 budget structure, straw man, whatever, but knowing that, as you indicate, that those deficits are such a problem, you want to come back with some suggestions.
Okay. We will do so.
Any other questions for Chief Hager?
We would be looking tonight for a recommendation from the council as to whether you'd like us to proceed with further negotiating the sale of that truck. And if so, we'd bring that back to you at a future meeting. The Finance Committee did consider it at their last meeting and recommended that the city council approve the sale.
Anybody have any objection to the sale?
No.
If the chief believes that we can maintain operational readiness without it, then I think let's move on that.
You make a motion?
Jim?
Sure. I move that council approve the sale of a tanker truck to City of Chaska.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Let me just, by way of conversation, is that too restrictive? Is there anybody else that you'd like to?
Somebody gonna bid against Chaska for it?
Yeah.
No.
It's important to us to keep it close by.
Yep.
It has some value. We'll come back to you. It's helpful to have a motion and direction tonight, but we'll come back to you with likely a resolution once we get all the details hammered out.
Well, we have a motion and a second. I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Go ahead, Andrew. Make a deal.
Thank you.
Do we, while we're still on the general subject here, the funding increase to 70,000, which is on the pro forma in 2017, do we want to move that up a little bit to try to either reduce or eliminate the dip in 2019 where it goes negative while we work on the bigger picture?
I think it'd be something that we can look at as we move through the 2016 budget process, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost sooner rather than later. I mean, certainly, you can anticipate in 8 years there could be a ton of changes in the way we do business and right away. But getting out in front of it, I'd be shocked if the ultimate solution doesn't cost more money. So the sooner we get started on it, exploring it, I think the better.
Is there and kind of on that same theme, is there any precedent for, I'm assuming that some of the additional demand here just comes by virtue of the fact that we're growing. Is there any statute or limitations or any precedent for, in the same way that we have park dedication fees with new development, is there any precedent for having, public safety equipment dedication fund that comes as part of that? I mean, it's those new properties that we have to help protect that drive the demand for these expenses, right?
Yeah, there's nothing that I'm aware of out there that statute-wise that would drive that.
Yeah.
How about as a best
Did anybody do
practice?
that?
Yeah, how about as a?
I don't know that state statute provides the ability to do that. I know exactly what you're talking about because that's something we did when I worked in Illinois. It was called an impact fee, and part of it went to the fire department. But I don't know that Minnesota state statute is set up for that.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, development impact fees as a general category are not permitted currently in Minnesota. I will say that there have been efforts, ideas, let's say, floated at the League of Cities and then brought over to legislators along that line that has never passed. Are there other creative ways? I think, Mayor, you're asking a question about sort of more creative ways. I suspect if folks looked into everything that's being done in your counterpart cities, there are probably some attempts at that, but there's no model that I'm aware of that has been deployed. So I think if you wanted your staff to look into that, they might find an example of a very creative attempt at that issue, but it is not something that is legislatively authorized and not something common.
In fact, it's not only not authorized, it's prohibited.
There is a particular case involving the city of Burnsville holding developer-paid development impact fees to be illegal. So yes, is the short
But from a legal perspective, your advice is it might be worth our while if we're interested to explore creative ways that could be successful.
Mayor and Council, I think if you wanted the staff to look into that, you might get some feedback from the staff. I don't want to prejudge whether you're going to like.
That's my next question.
examples that are out there. What I'm telling you, though, is that if you look solely to developers and new development as the source of that funding, that has been ruled on. That is not going to be the route that you're going to be hearing about. There may be other routes, though I'm just not creative enough as I sit here now to come up with ideas, but your staff might be able to come back with ideas. I don't want to prejudge, though, whether you'd like those ideas.
Lori?
We can definitely look into it. Off the top of my head, one of the things that some cities do is they charge for fire calls. It's a philosophical discussion that we can certainly have.
I think we've had that in the past. I think it's a bit of a lightning rod that you're not going to not put a fire out if somebody decided not to participate.
Well, Mayor and Council, I don't mean to make light of a very important public safety issue, but the city of Belle Plaine is an example of a city that has that sort of arrangement. And if you want to drive public input about, please waive my fee at every meeting, that's the way to do it. That is a very common public input topic in Belle Plaine, is not wanting to have to pay that fee for a fire that the owner of the property had nothing to do with or wasn't the cause of. So you're quite right. That is a way to get the public interested.
I think we had the city manager's enthusiastic response to take a brief look at alternatives.
I mean, if you know sitting here that this is a dead end, I don't want to consume time just to say we did it.
That's well said, yeah.
I think it's a good topic of conversation for Kelly and I as we're networking with our peers. And if we come up with something interesting, we'll definitely bring it back to the city council. But if it's okay, we'll just leave it at that. Not a promise that we'll come back with something, but as always, if we find something interesting, we'll bring it back to you.
Are we comfortable, I think?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
I think it's Andrew's time.
Thank you.
As a public service announcement for anyone watching at home, the fire department is headed over to Old City Hall to do some smoke training. So there will be no fire, just smoke.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Item B, approval of the audited financial reports for the year ended December 31, 2014.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Andy Berg from Abdo and Myers is here tonight to present the results of the city's audit and the financial report for the year ended 2014. So with that, I will turn it over to Andy.
All right, good evening. Like I've done in the past, I'll walk through the management letter that we issued that summarizes the financial information, so you may have reviewed that with your packet. I also put the slides in PowerPoints, so you'll be able to see them on screen. We did review the management letter and audit at a finance committee in May, so the finance committee has seen all this information prior to this too. All right, so the end result of the audit, what you hire us for is to issue an opinion on your financial statements. We issued a unmodified opinion or clean opinion, so the best opinion you can get. No other audit findings to report. As part of the audit, we also test for Minnesota legal compliance. No findings related to that. There's 7 different categories we test for, which are listed on the slide there, anywhere from contracting and bidding to tax increment financing and a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. So in the end, a completely clean audit. The whole audit went smoothly, no issues to report at all. So one other thing, the city has been submitting its financial statements to GFOA for a financial reporting certificate. They did receive that in 2013. So just want to congratulate the city there, and I anticipate they'll get that for this 2014 financial statements too. So looking at a summary of the numbers, starting with the general fund, the ending unassigned fund balance as compared to your next year's budgeted expenditures, less transfers. The blue line here is the ending unassigned fund balance. The red line is the budget. So you can see the last 4 years have been relatively consistent in percent and dollar amount, ranging from that 31.9% in 2011 to the 28.8% in 2014. The city does have a internal policy where they want to maintain that percent at 30%. The other item to point out, you can see the budget has increased since 2012 too, from the 2.9 million up to the 3.4 million. And the city has been able to maintain right around that 30% in the fund balance. If we look at the activity during the year in the general fund, here's a table that shows the final budget amounts compared to actual amounts. Relatively close to what was budgeted. Revenues, total of $4 million in revenues, with a variance of just $272,000, mainly in licenses and permits and charges for service. Expenditures, real close, $43,000 variance out of $3.2 million of expenditures. Transfers out, you did transfer out about $675,000 more than planned in the budget, mainly for the new public works building. So total decrease in the general fund balance of about $303,000, ending at $1.48 million. This just gives you a 3-year history of the revenues in the general fund. Just point out a couple things. As you know, the property taxes, that blue bar is your main revenue source at about 73% in 2014. Relatively consistent over the 3 years presented, with a little bit of a dip in 2013. And then the licenses and permits, the red bar, like I mentioned, that was above budget. That's increased each of the last 3 years with the new growth going on in the city. And then the charges for service, the purple bar, that has also increased each of the 3 years presented. If we look at a similar graph with the expenditures, you see there was some fluctuation in 2014. The blue bar there did increase from 2013. That's your general government expenditures, which is about 26% of your total expenditures in 2014. The next highest is the green bar, the public works, at about 21%. That has also increased each of the 3 years presented. The public safety, the red bar, makes about 17% of your total expenditures, and that's a decrease from 2013 into 2014. And then the purple bar, you see that large increase in 2014. That's the transfers out. That increase is related to that budget variance for the new public works building. The city does have 3 special revenue funds with a total ending fund balance of just over $1 million, an increase of $150,000, with the majority of that increase coming from the Victoria Recreation Center, which increased $131,000, which was higher than anticipated in the original budget by about, the original budget called for $122,000 increase. Your governmental debt service funds, the city does have just under 21 million bonds outstanding at the end of the year. If you look at the total interest payments over the life of the bonds, if those amortization schedules are followed, about 15 million. The graph there kind of gives you the total payments broken down by principal, the blue portion, and interest, the red portion. So the total debt service increases through 2017, and then if no new bonds were issued, you'd see that the debt service requirements decreasing out through 2024. You do have a bunch of capital project funds which tie into your long-term financial planning, which you guys were just discussing with the fire department. In total, you have about 5.4 million of ending fund balance, was a decrease of about 1.1 million from 2013 to 2014. Just to point out a couple of those. The third one down, the new City Hall building had an increase of 725,000 due to unspent bond proceeds, so that ending 604,000 of fund balance is restricted under those bonds being issued. The capital facilities fund had a decrease of 1.5 million, mainly for the public works building. And then if we skip down to the bottom, the permanent improvement revolving fund has a ending fund balance of about 1.35 million, increase of 256,000 due to transfers in. Now moving on to the city's enterprise funds. For each of these, there's a cash flow graph and then a cash balance graph. So here we give you the cash flow over a 4-year period. If we look at the two columns to the right, the 2014, the furthest right is your receipts broken down by receipts from operations, the blue bar, followed by other receipts mainly made up of connection fees, the orange. The gray is your operating disbursements, the green is your debt service disbursements, the principal and interest payments. So a couple items to point out here. Each of the 4 years presented, the total receipts are higher than the total disbursements, so cash has increased each of the years presented. The blue bar, the operating bar, has been slightly less than the total operating disbursements and debt service disbursements. So without the connections coming in, that the cash generated from operations wouldn't have totally covered the debt service and operating disbursements. So we looked at the effect on cash. You'll see that, like I mentioned, it did increase each of the 4 years presented. Back in 2011, there's about 965,000 total cash, about 303 million in 2014, which the city is factors this into their long-term planning and planning for future capital projects too. If you look at the sewer fund, the sewer doesn't have any debts. You won't see any green here, but the colors basically mean the same thing. So looking here, you can see the blue, the operating receipts did cover the operating disbursements, the gray each of the 4 years presented. You also had connection fees, which is orange, which also includes interfund, so transfers in. The other piece here, the maroon, you've seen 2013 and 14, there were significant capital expenditures, mainly related to the Wasserman project, I believe. So in 2013, the disbursements were quite a bit higher than the receipts, so we see a decrease in cash from 2012 to 13, and then cash staying about equal in 2014 with a slight decrease. So cash at the end of 2014, about 655,000. Then your stormwater cash flow, in 2013 and 14, the blue, the operating receipts, higher than the gray, the operating disbursements, allowing for cash to increase each of those years. There was some capital projects going on in 2012, which caused a little bit of a decrease, which we can see in this graph, the cash going down from 2011 to 12 and then increasing in 13 and 14, ending at about 472,000. And then the last thing I wanted to cover, which we mentioned the last couple of years, is a newer pension-related accounting standard that will be required to be implemented in 2015. The two pensions that apply to the city are the Public Employees Retirement Association, which all most of the employees are participate in that, and then your Fire Relief Association. Currently in the financial statements, you have a note disclosure and then an expense which equals your contribution. Implementing this standard is going to be more on an accrual basis, so you're going to be required to recognize the net pension liability if there is any, which allows for more comprehensive measure of pension expense. So currently, right now, the Public Employees Retirement Association has a net pension liability. They'll allocate that out to all members, employers, so all cities, schools, counties, based on a percentage of contributions, and each employer will be required to recognize that liability in their financial statements. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions related to that information or the actual financial statements.
Questions for Andrew? I have one. Actually, it's a two-parter. It's for Kelly. Your intention is to submit this for the CAFR Award again?
That's correct.
And every year you publish something aptly titled Popular Annual Financial Report for the City of Victoria. You're going to do that again?
Yes, I'm working on that as well.
Yeah, just for the audience, that's kind of, I don't know if it's finance for a layman, but it's a little bit easier to understand in the terminology in the presentation than, forgive me, Andrew, but some of yours are about a half an inch thick, a quarter inch thick. So we look forward to getting this. And again, I think the city owes Kelly and Tricia congratulations and thanks. You keep the books. Every year we get a clean audit, and that's where it starts, and the numbers just are working for us. So thank you, Kelly, you and your staff. Anything else? We'll move on to Kelly, you're going to talk about the 2016 budget update.
That's correct.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.
So for tonight, the purpose is to just kind of open up the budget discussion for 2016. There won't be a lot of details for tonight, but just kind of a background on where we're at in the process. We have gotten values from the county, so I've got a couple of items that were attached to the agenda statement. The first one is a budget calendar, and from the budget calendar, you can see that the city council, the finance committee, staff, we look at the budget multiple times during the year. We also open it up for public input. We have a couple of workshops scheduled, so we would recommend that any citizen or anyone interested in any of the budget discussions to let us know. Email, they can call, but we do welcome input on that. So looking at the calendar, we did send out the budget worksheets to staff, and we started working through those to see what the different requests are. We will have a preliminary budget to present to the Finance Committee at their meeting on June 17th, and then we'll keep working on that through the month and into July, and then coming into, it would be July 27th, staff would come back to the City Council and give an update on where we're at with the budget process. We'll continue to work on refining those budgets in August, and then we will have a council workshop and possible adoption of a preliminary levy and budget on September 14th. We do have to certify a preliminary budget and levy to the county by September 30th of each year. And then in November and December, we'll continue to refine those numbers. We'll get our health insurance numbers. We'll get some final tax capacity numbers. Then we'll plan to have another budget workshop with the council on November 23rd and final council adoption on December 14th. So I guess the first thing I'd ask is if there are any questions or concerns about the budget calendar. If not, we'll proceed with the dates we have chosen for those items.
Kelly, the budget calendar is essentially the calendar that we followed at least last year.
Yeah, it's very similar to the one we've used for the last few
No,
years
no
now.
drastic change.
No.
Kelly, will this be posted anywhere, like on the website or anything, so that if citizens want to see where they could attend and sort of just where they can get involved if they're interested in all of this information, it'll be available?
Yes, I believe there is a version of this on the website now, and after tonight, I will submit, this one has been updated a little bit, so I'll submit that to Jennifer and have her provide the most up-to-date one on the website.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so if we're okay with the calendar then, we can talk a little bit about the estimated market values that the county provided. For 2015, the estimated market value for the city is just under 1.3 billion, which is an increase of roughly 100 million from last year's number. I know those are very large numbers, but overall our increase was about 8.37% over last year. About 3.5% is due to new construction, which would be new homes. And then 4.6% of that amount is due to changes in the market value of existing properties. And if you look at the breakdown between residential, commercial, apartments, just about all of that came from our residential side. And if you look at the pie chart, you can see that the residential sector of our properties makes up 96%. We don't have a lot of commercial properties, so we rely mainly on the homeowners. And then finally, the last thing I'd touch on is that the median home value for taxes payable in 2016 increased from about $350,000 to $370,000. So we've seen some nice increases in value. It's important to note that we have estimated market values at this point, but we don't have our tax capacity numbers. So we're waiting for those numbers from Carver County. They're expected to come out in August at the latest. So I can't say for sure what will happen with our tax rates since we don't have our tax capacity numbers. In my agenda statement, I did point out that I did not expect the tax rate to increase in 2016 unless we have a substantial increase in the levy. So having said that, I would note that we do have some rather large items coming up on the budget for 2016. Every 10 years, the city has to update its comprehensive plan. So we will begin that process in 2016. We're looking at a 2-year process for that. Right now, that's roughly $150,000 we're looking at. And then one of the other big items that we've identified is possibly doing an AUAR for studying the area south of Marsh Lake Road. And this would be to look at the development possibilities because that's our next area of growth. And right now, the preliminary cost on that is $90,000. So having said that, I just want to prepare you. We don't have any numbers yet, but we do have a couple of big ticket items coming up. So I just wanted tonight let you know where we're at with estimated market value, talk a little bit about the calendar, and get any feedback from council as we prepare the budget. If you have any recommendations. The other thing we are trying to incorporate are items that were brought up in the strategic planning sessions. And then also the citizen survey, there were a number of things identified from that. So staff is working to incorporate those goals and ideas into the budget. And then I foresee that we will be presenting you with a number of items to look at and decide what we'd like to pursue in 2016. So with that, I'll take any questions or any feedback.
Quick question, Kelly, can you just tell me what is other on this particular document around assessment?
Well, this is estimated market values, so that could include properties that are not taxable, such as Three Rivers Park District.
Okay.
Or churches, things like that. That would be my guess.
Got it, thank you.
Anything else for Kelly? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Unfinished business? The citizen survey results, the web version.
Yeah, so this will be a brief presentation, but as you recall, a companion version of our mailed citizen survey was available on the website. It was available for just over a month for anyone that owns a business or lives in Victoria to complete. And I want to note, it was available after the scientific version had closed, but for the most part, prior to us having seen the results of the mailed survey. We left it open for about a week after we talked about it on May 11th, just in case anybody heard the presentation and thought, oh, I really had wanted to participate. We ended up with 97 completed surveys, and I just will go through briefly a few of the comparisons. I will say I did not see any big differences between the feedback we got from the mail survey versus the web version. And as you go through and look at just a few of the differences, keeping in mind that we had a margin of error of plus or minus 4%, most of these categories ended up falling right in there. Just really similar feedback. So I just, from each table that's in your packet, I just pulled a couple of measures so that you could quickly run through them and see, yes, they're off by a few percent, but in general, the people that self-selected to participate in the survey via the web felt pretty much the same way as those who received it through the random mail survey. Just highlighting one, you've got overall quality of life. People who responded to the web version gave it a 92% positive rating versus the mail version, 96%, right in that 4% that we expected. And a big part of why we do this is just to try to understand if there is a difference between the people that self-select and those who would receive the survey randomly. And so it's interesting to find that in our case, in this particular year, there isn't much of a difference. Again, overall feeling of safety in Victoria, something we scored very highly on in the mail survey. That same feeling is reflected in our web results. Looking at Table 5, some of our service-related things come in the next couple of tables. Our traffic flow, same. You can kind of see, I didn't find any items where we differed more than 10%. And for the most part, it was in that 4 to 5 range. Here's one where we are in that 10% range. Shopping opportunities, the people who self-selected felt a little bit more positive about our shopping opportunities than those that responded in the mail survey. And then kind of the reverse on the overall quality of new development. But again, pretty much a similar rating. This one stands out a little bit as in one of the few that's in that more than 10% difference category. Street repair, for some reason, rated very highly by those people that took the web survey. The web survey was open to everyone, but we did reach out to people that we've had contact with, that we have email addresses for, that are signed up for our email listserv, that for some other reason where we were able to reach with sort of an email outreach. So it may be that these people have worked with us recently and had a good experience. Otherwise, like I said, pretty similar. And on some of the governance issues, which we were interested in, you also see a very similar return from those who self-selected. And then the special topics, the questions that we were able to design that don't have any national benchmarks to compare to. There's, again, a little bit of difference from item to item, but there isn't anything that stood out to me as a huge difference that people who self-selected were interested in totally different things than those who were in the mail survey. Same source of information. This one absolutely makes sense that you see a much higher percentage on the city website. They obviously came to the survey through our city website. Maybe were brought there through an email that they received from us or through a post on social media. So that little bit of difference didn't surprise me at all. Same thing when you get into their most preferred source. Both groups selected our city website as their preferred source of city information. But then when you get down to second and third, you have a little bit of difference. And again, the people that took this survey might have come to us through one of these outlets, and people who took the mail survey are saying that the Victoria Spirit newsletter or local media outlets are their preferred source. On the open-ended question, you ended up with just a little bit of difference. As you recall, additional commercial development or just commercial development issues emerged as the #1 issue for people in the random version of the survey. They're a little bit more spread out on the web version of the survey. I did include the full open-ended report, just as you had for the mail. It can be a little bit difficult for the folks over at the National Citizen Survey to compress these. They don't always fit neatly in one category, but you do get the whole report so you can read through and know exactly what the flavor of those issues is. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I just want to briefly share that feedback with you. I've said before, when we talk about the survey and the results going forward, we'll be referencing the results from the mail survey, particularly because the results are so identical. That just makes sense going forward.
So we got the similar results, but it was a worthwhile endeavor, if only to show people that we're really interested in getting their feedback, and we're reaching out over and above the mail.
Yeah, I think so. I would have liked to see a higher number of respondents, but I think it is worthwhile to say we do want to hear from everybody. There's value in being able to generalize the results and say that if we had talked to every person, we're plus or minus 4% confident that these results would mirror what you would all say. But it's also important to say we didn't just care about the 1,200 that received the mail survey. Anybody who wanted to participate, we wanted to hear from.
Can I ask that you mail the PowerPoint that you just summarized that in?
Mm-hmm.
And will that also be posted to the website, the
Sure.
city website?
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If nothing else, we'll move on. The Victoria Lions Community Event Center.
Thank you. I'll start, and then I will note that we do have the members of the building committee, Chuck Freiberg, Al Orson, and Dave Lura here with us tonight. We have talked about this item a few times over the past couple of months, and we are approaching the June 12th deadline for consideration in the state bonding bill. I won't go through the entire funding proposition again, but just for those who are just joining the issue, part of the proposal is that we would apply to the state of Minnesota for $500,000 from their CIP program, commonly referred to as the bonding bill. At our last conversation, we had outlined a number of steps that we would like to take to ascertain whether we would be in a position to apply for the bonding bill funding. And I'll briefly go through the action items that are outlined in the staff memo. One of our charges was to meet with our local legislators to further ascertain whether this project is something that they would support. We were not able to accomplish that. As you know, the legislative session was, the legislature was in session, and now a special session is imminent, of course, but we would still like to be able to do that. We talked about holding a neighborhood meeting, but as we reflected on it a little bit more, we postponed the neighborhood meeting until we are more certain of the viability of the project in the proposed location. So that would be something that would still be on our radar for the future. We had talked at our last meeting about a financial feasibility study, and the members of the building committee and the Lions did look into what it would take to hire a consultant for that work. The estimates that they've received would be between $10,000 and $20,000, and they would be looking to see if the city would be willing to partner in that cost. We talked about the transfer of the SAC units from Old City Hall, and what we've determined for now is that the units from Old City Hall were grandfathered and would not be eligible for transfer. That's something that, should this project get to that stage, we could certainly talk about appealing. And then you also approved on your last council meeting agenda the removal of some property and storage for the Lions' future use. And they did accomplish that in the time since we last met. So I thank you very much to all the people that volunteered to help move out of Old City Hall in preparation for demolition, as well as to our Public Works Department for assisting in that move. So that's where we are in the action items we talked about previously. Where are we now? The deadline to submit an application to the bonding bill is June 12th. I had the opportunity to speak with the state and try to understand that process a little bit more. What I have learned is that we need to submit by June 12th, but a resolution of support from the city could be delayed until October 16th. That is their final deadline. If we submitted an application by June 12th, what would happen is that all the requests statewide are published and distributed to all the legislators, the governor, published, etc. And then the OMB spends the time between June 12th and October figuring out if those projects are eligible, narrowing down on information that they need. And then we would need to submit that resolution of support by the October date in order for it to be forwarded officially to the governor for consideration. And then we work through the session next spring for final consideration. What I was able to glean from the director of the bonding bill process is that this project is likely not eligible for GO bond funds because of the element of private use that we've outlined. But similar event center, civic center projects have been funded by the state in the past. They just have to use a cash allocation. So it's it may make it a little bit more difficult, but not impossible. I've outlined a couple of options that we could pursue this evening. If we're going to apply for the June 12th, 2016 bonding bill, obviously that's something that staff and the Lions would need to work on this week. And then I've kind of run through the additional steps that we would need to take. Other options would be to delay application to the bonding bill until 2018. That application would be due in June of 2017. Or if we're not interested in pursuing the bonding bill funds, we could talk about other directions for the project.
Council.
I would recommend we go forth with option A.
Of all the things that we asked you to look into, that certainly is the most important, is the source of funding, if available at all, from the state. And we remind us, an application doesn't commit us.
The application does not commit us. What would commit us would be that resolution of support in October. But I just want to make sure we would be publishing statewide that we're pursuing this request. So there is some element of expression of support by publishing, but you're not on the hook to spend the money and execute the project.
Yeah, certainly our credibility is at least a little at stake here. But under the circumstances, I think I agree with Jim. It's a worthwhile project to pursue if we and we're talking about a fairly sizable amount of funding. Like
$500,000, yeah, 50% of the project.
I do have one thing that I do want to bring up. I happened to be driving in Chaska last week, and their Fireman's Park area is, of course, where the curling rink is going. What I didn't realize until I looked closely at their renderings and the signage and then went online is they're also building a 300-seat banquet hall. Huge windows, fireplace. They're touting wonderful wall coverings. I mean, you can go to any of the documentation. They talk more about it. They're going to have patios. They're going to have an outdoor performance area, beach promenade, a park, redo and upgrade. And so my one concern is what happens after we build it and the competition for us to be able to run it as an event center after the fact. And so I do have some concern around that with Chaska being so close and the ability of their location to offer more amenities than the location we are currently looking at for ours.
I think we should apply to the city of Chaska for a grant. Sorry.
No, I think those are the, those are the risks we're all kind of struggling with, is
Wrestling.
trying to make sure that we don't have an overly optimistic view, but certainly want to be a welcoming place to continue our long relationship with the Lions. And I think I expressed at the last meeting that without the state money, it becomes almost impossible to see how this can work without some other funding source. So I think, pushing forward to try and get that bonding money is got to be our most important task.
I think the Lions are a very important part of the community, and I think in my recommendation to go forward with option A, and I'm reinforcing that I see this as an important part. Lots of I's to dot and T's to cross, but this is really the first one.
In the Chaska situation, did they make any reference to the rates that they're charging to?
I didn't dig that deep, but certainly the renderings show some really nice locations and pieces for weddings and all the same things that we would want to go after with this building. I don't have an issue with going forward at this point in time, but what I do have concern with is the viability long-term. If we should get the money and build it, what happens after? How do we, keep that viable? And so I think, again, we'll need to consider what that looks like and what that means. I agree. The Lions are really important to us here in Victoria and have been an incredible partner over the years. So I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see us continue to look at other options that might or might not exist today. I don't know, but to continue to look for that because I do want to find them a home. I'm just also wanting to make sure as we look at this project that, what's the viability after we have that money to build it? What happens after?
Well, and I agree with you, and I think it doesn't surprise me that something like this would come up. Any business that any new business that's going to open has to make an assessment of what the potential competition will be, knowing that whatever estimate is made, it will change. And so here's the change. That just means, in my mind, updating the business plan and revalidating the business plan. And my guess is over the next 6 to 12 months, it's going to change more times. And it's just part of the process. So.
Well, the question, I guess, on the table is how do we feel about at least taking that first step and submitting the letter to the state bonding fund? I'm in favor of it.
Too.
I'm fine with that. As I said, I'm fine with going forward with that. My big concern is what happens after.
Tom?
I'm in favor as well. And again, stepping carefully, piece by piece, as we get answers to the various questions.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, let me just ask one question, and this is not site-specific, correct? So in other words, the park, which has been kind of identified as the primary location, or two locations within Lions Park have been kind of identified as the main area. But if a better site came up, does that affect the request for support or for the bonding money?
My understanding now is that by October 16th, we would need to know the location, and that if the request were granted, it would be site-specific.
Thank you.
That's not till the middle of October.
Correct.
I mean,
Start the process.
Yeah, so I think, given what I'm hearing, we need to work on the timing of the neighborhood meeting, and we need to further discuss the financial feasibility study, whether that's something that the city is interested in partnering in the expense of, whether there's another way that we can get that accomplished. Certainly, the building committee has done a lot of research. They've done a lot of one-on-one meetings with area businesses. And what we talked about at the last meeting was what's our next step to sort of market test what we feel like we're hearing from the area caterers and other venues.
so you have direction sufficient to
I do. Thank
proceed?
you. Good.
Thank you. And I guess the to the building committee. I echo what someone has said here already. You've done a tremendous amount of work. You're a very important constituency in this community, and we owe you an honest look at this, and we got to do everything we can to, within reason, to make it a success. And clearly, a source of funding to the tune of half of the cost of the project it would be a significant step. But maybe if that's not there, then what? You know, we have to figure out a go forward strategy. But for now, we're going to submit the letter by June 12th. Okay.
Did you have a question?
Al?
With the recommendation of City Manager Lori, I've contacted a Carver County agency called Open for Business.
Thank you.
And have had email contact with them. They are an agency that helps usually private enterprises in putting together a business plan, but have indicated that they would review what we've done, point out where we might be able to strengthen our business plan. So we are in the background working on that strategy.
Leaving no stone unturned. Yeah. All right. We'd expect nothing less from you guys. Thank you all. The demo of the old City Hall, item from the consent agenda.
I'll let City Engineer Kara Gehring give their report on this one.
Mayor and Council, the reason we moved this from the consent agenda is just to provide some additional information related to the abatement portion of the work. So the information in the agenda item related to demolition of the actual City Hall and the footing and foundation remains unchanged, but we also were subsequently working on getting quotes for the abatement side of the work. So the building has had all its important contents removed. As noted earlier tonight, the fire department is doing some training in the building at this point because it's vacant and available for that. Per the agenda item, we received quotes for demolition of the building. 2 quotes. The low quote is Wickenhauser Excavating in an amount of $30,685. Our budget for this work, back when we worked on the overall project budget for City Hall, was about $40,000. So we've been obtaining quotes for abatement, so that's asbestos removal, both of tiles and then the vermiculite that's in the building, the insulation. Our lowest quote was about $8,000. But because the building is now empty, we've had the opportunity to do some destructive testing to determine whether there's any more specifically flooring in areas that we hadn't previously identified. We've discovered that there are, so initially we had identified the building official's office, and now it looks like some of the storage rooms and the hallway also have that tile in the area. We did also pull the tile, so in the whole council chambers, there's tile underneath the carpet, so we took samples of that and sent that in. Our building official and our building inspector, who's leading this testing effort, don't think what they saw in the City Hall building council chamber area is asbestos, but the other areas did come back positive. So, long story short, we think our quotes for $7,500 aren't high enough. So we were originally anticipating that we would be able to just approve that at a staff level because it would be under the $10,000 mark. We now think it's going to come up higher. Based on our best guess of information we have today, we think it might be more like $15,000. But until we get the test results on that city council chambers, we won't know for sure. So we didn't necessarily want to delay 2 weeks to finalize those quotes and bring them back. So we wanted to discuss the opportunity of the city council authorizing us to enter into a contract with the low quoter for the abatement in an amount up to some amount that you might feel comfortable with. From our perspective, it's not like it's optional work. We're all in agreement that we're demoing City Hall and we have to properly dispose of the materials in it. So we might be able to keep the process moving more quickly if we don't have to wait 2 weeks to come back with those final quotes to City Council. So again, we're thinking, based on the best information we have today, it's more like 15,000, but the city manager and I had talked about maybe getting approval up to 25,000 to give us a little bit of leeway. So once we get those final results, we'll update all of our quotes and still select the low quoter for the work. Any questions?
From a budget perspective, this was part of the overall City Hall construction budget, and there was 40,000 in there. What about the rest of the budget? How did we do against that? Is there any remaining amount in there that will cover this?
Sure. So this specific area of work is identified in that set of numbers on my spreadsheet from way back when that we're going to be using TIF to reimburse ourselves for that work. So it was specifically in that pool of money versus in the pool of money that was coming out of the construction budgets. Overall, we're still a little bit under budget, but we're still working through some outstanding items on our list. HVAC continues to be something that we're dealing with. It's a little warm in here today, and our AV room is running at about 80 degrees, which is not ideal, so we're working through that issue. There's some other items that had been on the list that we're still getting quotes for. The parking lot across the street is one of those items that I had spoken with the city council on, that we were going to be doing some work on for the parking lot. We've now decided that summer is not the best time to close part of that parking lot to widen it, so we'll be bringing that forward in the fall. This dollar amount, even up to the 25, doesn't seem to break the bank from where we're sitting right now, but it certainly is above what we had identified. But again, it's not optional, so.
Kara, what are your plans once the building is demolished to pave that?
So what had been anticipated in our exercise for when we made the decision of where we were locating the buildings, what had been discussed was that we'd take the building down and we'd put gravel in the place of where the building was and pave it. One of the things we've been talking about at a staff level is there's been a lot of change that has occurred in ownership of parcels around that area and potential interest by neighboring parcels to maybe be more interested in collaborating with doing, I guess, a more comprehensive look at how the parking lot fits together to see if we can maximize parking stalls. So that's something that the community development director has been talking with adjacent landowners to see if there's a way to kind of reconfigure things even beyond just paving over an area to try to maximize parking. So once we get a little further in that process, we'll bring that back. But in the meantime, the building will get knocked down, we'll get gravel down so we can start using it right away for additional parking capacity.
If I hear you right, 31,000 for the demo, and you're saying we had 8 in the budget for asbestos removal. It could be 15, but you're looking for 25.
Yeah.
31 and 25, quick math is 56. Can we? Again, I'm not suggesting we don't do this because the building's coming down. But where does that one item put us in jeopardy of exceeding the budget?
I don't think so. Not at this point yet. We'll just have to maybe look at the things that we're still working our way through to make sure we can still do them all. And we're also looking at what we're expecting from TIF to come back in. So Kelly's working on that analysis to see what that number looks like now that we have more information on the projects planned for Victoria Drive.
So remind us again, what do you want tonight?
So tonight specifically, we would want approval first for approval of the quote from Wickenhauser Excavating in an amount of $30,685 for the demolition of City Hall. So that would be the first thing. And then second thing would be approval to hire the low quoter in an amount not to exceed $25,000 for abatement of the old City Hall.
Somebody want to make the first motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the low bid from Wickenhauser Excavating in the amount of $30,685 to proceed with the demolition of the old City Hall.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We've got that authorization. Now we need authorization to take the low bid up to an amount not to exceed 25,000 for the asbestos removal.
That's what we're requesting.
Okay.
So I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 25,000 for asbestos.
So I don't know if this is a,
Preferably 15.
Or less.
yeah. I don't know if this is an appropriate place to kind of insert this request, but somewhere along the way, since tonight we've approved under the consent agenda the final payment request for the City Hall and Library, and I think we've already crossed that threshold with the Public Works Building some time ago. Kind of in my experience in the private business world, you do a major project, when you're done, you wait a little bit of time for things to kind of settle into a kind of a new normal, and then look back on it and do a bit of a postmortem and say, how did the project go? What were our expectations when we went into this? Did we achieve them? Are there, tweaks? Maybe we exceeded them in some cases, but I would like to see, I guess I'll make a formal request that we do a postmortem on both of the projects. Ann and I had a brief conversation about this Friday, and Chuck at the Public Works Building, and I'd like to see if it's possible to do it maybe within, the July timeframe, so 30 days or so, or 45, depending on how the information is available. But again, looking at it not only from a budget standpoint, but also functionally, are the buildings, the projects performing as anticipated? And then, a little bit of a bullet pointed list of what are the benefits that we gained, and are there minor or, additional efforts that we could put in that would even take greater advantage of these new resources. And then, maybe 30 days behind that, if we could do a similar review of this facility. And again, I guess it would probably make sense to include the complete project, including demolition of the old site and budgets, kind of put a bow around the whole thing.
What are the surprises? What would,
we do?
knowing what we know now, I can't even say that. What would we do differently? Thank you.
Exactly, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, lessons learned, benefits, things that didn't go as well, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
No, that's a great step, because all too often you move in and you forget about all of the steps that got us here, and some were appropriate, some maybe were missteps, and that'd be a great idea to, how do you feel, Lori?
No, I agree. I think you work so hard, and then sometimes you just sort of sigh of relief that you got it all done. But it would be a great idea to look at what we've learned. We kind of know what the benefits are, but for our residents and people who would be interested, I think it's a great idea.
Well, and in the course of the conversation with Ann and Chuck, I heard a lot of very positive comments, just a lot of operational efficiency, things we do ourselves now that we didn't do before, things that not only improve our response time, but prevent loss of use for having to take a truck in to get an oil change that we can do ourselves, and just the staff time to go do that. Things like, it used to take us 3 people to change a snowplow. We can do it with 1 now because we have an overhead hoist. And so, I think, my hat's off to the Public Works staff in the past for operating in a safe manner when the proper equipment wasn't available. But now that we have the proper equipment, there's some benefits in terms of efficiency that I think it's a great opportunity to kind of trumpet those a little bit.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay. The Victoria Rec Center, Detail and Park site layout, site overview.
Yes, I asked Ann Monkey to prepare a map for me so that I would understand what the potential for future development or expansion at the rec center is. On my list of most frequently asked questions when I'm out and about is, what else is going to happen at the rec center? Could you add, and then insert amenity of choice here? And when I met with Ann to go over the map that's in front of you, I'll say for myself, I was a little bit surprised, because when you pull up to the building, it does look like there's a lot of room for expansion. But when you dig a little bit deeper into what's going on the site, certainly there are some things that could be done, but there would be some sort of trade-offs. And given that I'm asked about this so frequently, I thought it would be helpful for Ann to give us an overview. And no action, not looking for any action tonight, just kind of similar to the fire department, reacquainting ourselves with where we are, so that if you're asked this question as much as I am, we've all kind of got the same information.
Great, thank you, Lori. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I know over the past several years, there's always questions about, oh, we can put it at the rec center, and when is the pool going in at the rec center? That's probably my most frequent one. So we've kind of put together a little map for you that shows, what basically the 37-plus acre site looks like and what is on the site. We've got a three-field ball field complex that are fenced fields. The intent is in the CIP to put some kind of a pavilion shelter within those 3 fields to make it more usable and make it more friendly for those people that utilize those fields and also visitors. The soccer field, which is off into the southeast corner of the site, actually was rebuilt back in 2012 for about $300,000 when all was said and done. So I'm not sure that's a site that we'd want to take a really long, hard look at. So then I asked Kara to pull together the water and sewer and stormwater facilities that are located on site. As you can see, the water connects through the development to the east and then also the development to the north. And looking at those depths, especially of the sewer lines and storm sewer lines, most of them are pretty flat elevation, so it'd be a real challenge from a depth perspective to relocate those. We did look at the water, and that is one thing that we could probably deal with, moving water line. But you can see that there is a lot of water on site, lines themselves. We also put in the stormwater ponds. Those are the blue slashed. When the building expanded back in 2008, both parking lot and stormwater ponds were increased in size, really taking up the entire site for development at this time with existing facilities. So I know when we move forward and looking at this site as an alternative for other recreational facilities, there's going to have to be some considerations made. The type of facility, with each thing that gets added on, more parking would be required. More stormwater would be required. And obviously we've got some utilities that we'd really have to take a look at as well. So, just a brief outline of what we have out there, and certainly open to any questions, ideas, suggestions as we move forward.
And you didn't comment on, one of the other things we have out there is an abundance of neighbors.
Correct.
Basically surrounding the site.
Correct.
On 3 sides. And as I recall some of the prior discussions, they're a very energetic and interested group.
Yes, we did put in some landscaping on both the east and west side of the facility when the expansion went in back in 2008.
Okay. Questions or comments for Ann?
Very helpful. I mean, it's definitely a complicated puzzle here.
It certainly is. I think the expansion really, in some ways changed the future of that facility. I know at one point in time there was going to be an outdoor rink that was added where the playground is now. That whole hard surface, that was supposed to be I understand, a hockey rink. I suspect it could have accommodated some type of water feature, whether it's a splash pad. I mean, that still could happen easily enough on the blacktop area, but with the addition of the 2 larger parking lots too, it really took up and filled up the site pretty quickly. So
that hard surface out in what I would call the back, where the playground and I think the skate park.
Yep.
That's where I think most people think a pool belongs or was intended to be. Obviously, you have to give up the stuff that's there, but
Yep.
given that that's already hard surface, would that have an impact on stormwater pond sizing?
Believe that it would, yes, because you're going to add additional concrete. One of the things too, it's not a very big area. That in scope of size, you're probably looking at an area of about 100, maybe 120 feet by about 60 feet. So it doesn't really, I mean, to do an outdoor pool, it'd be a very small site to work with.
I have no idea what a
Yeah.
full footprint looks like, but can you dig stormwater ponds deeper to give them greater capacity and still meet the site runoff requirements if the footprint was smaller?
I see the city engineer shaking
Shaking
her
her
head.
head.
They have a specific design criteria, so you can't just make them deeper.
There'd be a lot of very small, deep holes. Like wells. All right, thank you.
And how would you characterize the intensity of use of the existing uses? Is there a segment of this site that looks like it's fully, I mean, to me, it looks like it's fully utilized, but if the ball diamonds aren't intensely used, maybe there's opportunity there, but how would you characterize the intensity of the uses?
From spring until through summer, the ball fields see significant use. They're programmed Monday through Saturdays. The soccer fields are very heavily used from spring all the way through fall. I know I just went out there today and took a look at it, and tons of kids, tons of cars. You know, that they hadn't even started game time, and half the parking lot was full of cars already. So,
Is that true also of the soccer field that's on the northwest side of this site? Because that field is not a great field in terms of a game field. It's probably okay for practice, but
yep,
pretty rough.
Yep, and we actually just did some maintenance on it this last fall and spring, so we've taken that out of commission for this year, just to give it a chance to establish and regrow from that maintenance. So because of the use that all these, like especially the soccer fields, we're ending up rotating one out of service annually just to give it a fresh tune-up and make-up so we can come back at full strength. But actually, it does get a lot of use as well.
Okay, so it wouldn't be, that was the one part of the site that I thought, you know, if you needed to repurpose it for additional parking and to grow the
Yep.
footprint for a pool, if you lost that, how much of a loss would that be? Sounds like significant.
It would be. And, yeah, in that case, you know, yes, you could add on parking in that location, but no structure.
I used to frequent that parking lot as part of a softball coaching, and it's pretty bad if you don't get there early. You're going to be circling or waiting or.
Well, and now we're getting to, in July, we'll start having hockey camps and some of the high schools coming in for captain's practices, and they will take up that whole back parking lot as well throughout the day.
So what is the recommendation? I look at the utilities and the complex kind of spaghetti web of utilities crisscrossing the site and the intensity of the uses, and I wouldn't relish going to one of those constituencies and saying we're going to repurpose your field, your use. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know that there has been suggestions before, and like I said, I get hit every week about where the new pool is going and when it's coming, and so I just wanted to provide the information of what the site actually looks like to you guys, so you have an understanding too.
Lori, how about you, your reaction?
My reaction was just similar. I get this question all the time. What else could we do at the rec center? Could we add on? Could we put, I think Councilmember Pavelko asked last time, could we do a $250,000 addition to the rec center in lieu of building a separate facility for the Lions? And so after Ann presented this to me, I found it a little bit eye-opening. And so I thought you all might be familiar with it, but it would be good to reacquaint ourselves with what's here, what the potential is, and just to have it out there for the general public that, like I said, you pull up and it looks like there is a lot of open space, the possibilities might be sort of limitless. And then when you get all the utilities and the stormwater and the parking requirements on the map, it becomes obvious that there will be trade-offs if we want to do something different. So it's simply an informational
And
item.
unless you have children playing on one of those ball fields, you drive by there at 30 miles an hour and it looks like it's wide open.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on?
Nope.
Ann, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good information, thank you.
Reports of the city manager.
Yes, I have 3 quick items for you tonight. First, I mentioned in my weekly update, we did put together a polo shirt with our Centennial logo, which of course is on the wall behind you. Those are available for purchase. We're not making a profit on them or anything, but they're $22. It's a dry fit gray polo with the logo embroidered on it. So if that's something that anyone is interested in ordering, you can definitely sign up here. Second item, since Kara is still up here, or back up here, she has a few pictures of the construction of the water storage facility that she was going to show just to tell us how things are going.
Yeah, so if you've had an opportunity to drive over by Rhapsody Park at all lately, there's a lot of activity going on at the park with the construction of the water storage facility underway. So this over here on the right is a picture from the water booster station and park shelter showing the very large pile of material that was excavated to create the big hole in the ground to construct the underground storage facility. The picture on the left is actually the footing or the floor and foundation for the water storage facility all formed up. It is quite large in diameter, which I don't remember now off the top of my head. 90, thank you. 90 feet, pretty big. So here's a zoomed in look at all the rebar that is going into the foundation, and it was poured last Thursday. So there they are, their concrete trucks down in the hole, pouring the concrete. A couple more pictures of it. Whole lot of steel in there. And then this is a picture of the forms that are being created for the walls. So with the completion of the floor, and they did finish pouring it, I think on Thursday. They might have had to do some more on Friday. They're starting to work on the walls then. And that will be a very long process to get those all put together and framed up and poured. So if you're looking to see some exciting construction, you may want to go by and see it. Though, if you're going to go anywhere near the site, you would need a hard hat and a safety vest and probably an escort. So.
And maybe some boots.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't put your handprint in the contract.
And that's all I had on that.
Cool, thank you.
And the final item, I will show you. City Clerk Jenny Kresh has been hard at work getting us live on Granicus. And she didn't want to tell you beforehand that we would be live in case it didn't work. But she sent me a text earlier. She's back in the AV room that it indeed works. So this is what the page looks like. So if you go to our homepage, then you would click on Virtual City Hall, and then you have New City Council Videos Live Stream. Will take you to this page. And then I think she wants me to click on the in progress. Yep. This is going to be weird. We're going to see ourselves on TV. And there we are.
Very cool.
Jenny, where are you going? Come back here a minute. Let us.
So I will say, Jenny has worked really hard to get us ahead of schedule on this. She called Granicus with a question on Friday, and they said, "What are you doing? You're 3 trainings ahead of where you're supposed to be." But from here on out, we should be good to be live on Granicus.
That is
This is fabulous.
And you mean live, as we are.
Live.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So I will be sending out information as to how to download things. It's called iLegislate on your iPad. And information on how that all works. I have not had any training on it. I think I've got it all figured out and I've got everybody set up. It's just a matter of getting the information out to you and letting me actually use the program and trying it out after we did this. So I officially haven't had training on this yet. So
Our
I have
goal
just
is
figured
to
it out.
migrate the publication of the packet to Granicus, and that would be our sole place that we would publish it. So you can see the hyperlinks here. You can download the staff reports without having to download the large PDF document. For the next couple months, foreseeable future, we'll be duplicating the process so you can download it as you are through iAnnotate or use the iLegislate. But our goal, once we know everything is working, is to move strictly to the Granicus app.
And at the risk of showing my ignorance, it gets on the Granicus app. How does it get to the iPad?
So it's live stored on the website. So you, rather than downloading the packet, you just use your internet connection to view each item.
Perfect.
And then it saves it on there. So once you've downloaded it or looked at it once, it's automatically saved in the iLegislate application. And then the videos after I hit stop on the recording tonight, it automatically populates itself and is up there as an archived meeting. So then you can go in and you can view it, and you can go in and click on my timestamps that I'm putting in place for each of these items and go directly to the topic instead of watching the whole video or trying to scroll through to get to the specific topic.
This is so cool. Do you realize you're on TV now?
Yes, I do.
Speaking of TV, we're also getting close to broadcasting on Mediacom Channel 8. I don't think we have an exact date yet, but we are working on the equipment that's necessary to be live for Mediacom viewers as well.
Yeah, we have all of our equipment in place. We're just waiting on them to bring their equipment in here, and it's just basically a plug and play, and we're ready to go.
So anybody after tonight who wishes to see any of the proceedings that have been conducted here tonight will go to the website, make those few clicks, and disappears.
Yes, and we'll definitely publish all this information, get the links out, and communicate it with everybody so they can watch the council meetings from home if they would choose.
To say it's cool, that's a technical term. It's cool.
That is great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll shut it down so we don't have to watch ourselves. And then if I may, I would turn it over to begin your mayor and council reports. The mayor, Councilmember Bassa, and I attended a referendum 2015 update with the school district on May 29th. Typically, the mayor and I go every other month and meet with the mayors and administrators from each community in District 112, along with their finance director, community ed director, and superintendent Jim Bauk. We were invited to bring one additional member from our council this last Friday to talk about the referendum and sort of an expanded topic. And Councilmember Bassa has agreed to sort of review that meeting agenda and materials with you tonight.
So I'm going to just give you the biggest highlights that I got out of this. There is a ton of information in the packet showing where we fall on things like our revenue in terms of referendum revenue per student, cost per student operating wise, all of that information. So the details there. One thing that was really nice was to be invited and to be part of that discussion and understand it. They did a full presentation and then took questions. The interesting things are, again, we're going to continue to see growth in enrollment. Just from 2014 to 2019, that's going to be about 577 students based on their estimating process, which is both based on history as well as a housing model that they use as well. So they do a lot of work to try to be as accurate as possible with what they can. The focus will be in the elementary area in particular. They're already capping certain programs now because of space constraints. So that's like the La Academia or the Family Learning Center. So again, some of those earlier education even pieces from that perspective as well. The one thing they did note that is if Governor Dayton's plan passes for all-day kindergarten, everything has to be relooked at because space will be a huge issue.
I think you meant
4K.
Pre-K, thank you, not kindergarten, pre-K, thanks. Correction. They did share their recommendations for where the building locations will be. So the multipurpose dome will be at the Chaska Middle School East location. That gym is very small and in need of more space there. They talked about the factor that the pool will be planned and be done at Pioneer Ridge. That school has always and is set up for further additions, and that's the way they built that location. The Clover Ridge and Victoria elementary schools will get additions if this, again, referendum goes through. And then a new elementary school, they did not actually give the location, but will be Chaska or Carver. And if you look at the map in terms of where things fall out, it does make sense because that's where the growth is, that's where the issues are in terms of having to be able to meet the coming need and the growth. You know, if you were to ask me my impression, I think they've definitely done their homework. They're very financially focused. They have been essentially at, I think he said for way before the governor, wasn't Dayton, it was, who was Plenty, thank you, before he required that a certain percentage go to instruction from every dollar. This particular district has been doing that for quite some time, and so 73.7 cents of the dollar goes to instruction. And I just thought that was interesting to see the impact and how they look at that, and that they've been leading the way for quite some time. I think they're very open to partnership. I think we just need to be out there and working with them, as we've already sort of identified and need to do. The referendum so far in early polling is highly supported from the community. And they're doing a number of things just to help make sure people understand where things are and what this looks like, all the way to sort of some preliminary design work for people to look at in terms of the buildings and that kind of piece. I think the biggest thing we need to do, besides continuing to work on the partnership with them, is start recruiting now to get a candidate to run for the school board for the fall 2016 election. I think it's really a shame we don't have that regular representation, and we need it. Is there anything else you'd add, Lori or Tom?
How about the 20-acre site? You want to?
Oh.
They do own a 20-acre site in Victoria, and they're looking at that for a future elementary school. Particularly, we've talked about some development that may occur in the northwest quadrant of Chaska. That, in addition to the growth that's going on in Victoria, would be the impetus for that elementary school. I've sort of gotten the impression that that's either the next elementary school or the next one after that. It kind of depends on that large parcel in Chaska and when and how that develops.
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize them. We certainly didn't get a promise, but there's a strong tendency that's pretty obvious that would be the next elementary.
Yeah, that's the sense I've gotten.
And I think they've done a number of surveys of some potential support, and I think it was 70+% was the people who strongly or in large measure support the referendum. And he'll be coming here, as he did the last time with the last referendum. They'll be coming here to the council and make a presentation and field questions.
Yep, and they're coming on the next couple meetings that the school board has. They'll be making decisions on things like the location of the elementary school, how the referendum questions will be worded, how many questions there will be. So we'll continue to provide updates as they give us that information. And then I'd expect that you'll see them in August and September timeframe.
If nothing else, any other council members have anything to report?
I did skip one item if you have just a couple more minutes. Last time we were going to give you an update on where we are with the Hoisington-Kogler work. And if we have a couple minutes, I would have Ben fill us in on that schedule.
Good evening. So really quick, I just wanted to give you an update where we stand. Obviously, we moved forward with Hoisington-Kogler. One of their first tasks was putting together an engagement strategy plan. They've done that. And part of that, which I can send out to you, was also starting to sit down with a focus group, similar to what we did with the strategic plan, get a group of individuals together that kind of have a wide variety of interest in the city. This coming Monday, so next Monday, June 15th, here in the council chambers, we'll have a focus group comprised, very similar group to what was done for the strategic planning session. they'll meet, provide some general input to Hoysen and Kogler on kind of a general direction of things that need to be tackled. Hoysen and Kogler has all of the information we've already talked about from our strategic plan. They've gotten a copy of the citizen survey, as well as getting an update of what we learned from our ULI workshop. So we'll have pretty good grounds of understanding to kind of facilitate that discussion with the group. And then their intent would be over the course of the following week to do some schematics, some concepts that would get put together, and we would have an open house. Working on finalizing the date for that right now. I think likely would happen Wednesday, June 24th. But we'll get that information out as soon as possible. I should know tomorrow. I just need to make sure they have their availability to have a full day of planning and then go right into an open house that night. And the intent would be to get public feedback on not only what the focus group had put together, but also kind of what they had landed on from kind of our existing conditions in place. At the same time that they're working on some of their planning, we'll be setting up meetings with a number of individual property owners around and business owners in the downtown, so that hopefully they're getting that information as we're putting some of the concepts together. And that should hopefully begin to kind of set the stage for having a better position to talk about parking strategy or any other development downtown as we move forward.
Ben, you said the first date you said was a focus group on the 15th?
On the 15th. Certainly you'd be welcome to come if you wanted to sit and kind of hear the conversation. The intent would be to have that focus group really be the participants in that group, but if you wanted to kind of come and understand that conversation, please feel free to do so.
Have you sorted through the logistics of that? That's the same night as the Deer Run neighborhood meeting.
Just read my mind. I was like, July 5th or June 15th.
Where are you doing it here?
Here, and there's over 230 plus residents that I don't think will all show up, but I expect.
Yeah, I knew that one. Okay.
You might want to rework.
I will have to find a different location, but that's okay.
Will the focus group, will there be an effort to include the same people or different people, or any particular effort on how what the composition of that
Yep,
focus
I
group is?
reached out to all the people that had participated in the strategic plan, and then sent out to a number of other individuals that have identified some level of interest in participating in that to date. I think I have 12 to 15 people that have already committed that they would participate in it.
I don't know if this is well, it's completely unscientific, but I would almost want to get a fresh group, you know what I mean, in terms of not having the same, if we can engage more people more broadly and try and get a different makeup of that group, unless there's a specific goal of, you know, like this is the next step, so the same people who, you know.
That was part of the thought in it, is that we had a pretty good group that worked together. A lot of different interests. I mean, they weren't all just saying the same thing, so to speak, but we were trying to add some additional people to that mix to keep it a little bit more fresh. But that group went through one facilitation model and it was successful. And not that we don't want to include more people, but the general intent was to use that group because they had such a good working relationship when they got in that environment the last time.
And they were pretty carefully chosen too, weren't they, that first group?
Mm-hmm.
Just think to the extent that others can be added, it's always in our benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that has nothing to do with anybody who was there before. It's just
Sure.
really about being broader.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
That's it?
Thank you.
At the risk of misstatement, the City Council is now going into closed session to consider purchase of property, PID 65.0134500, under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05, Subdivision 3. The City Council may close a meeting to develop or consider offers or counteroffers for the purchase or sale of real or personal property. The closed session will be electronically recorded. We will now all adjourn to the large conference room.
Is that a motion, and
No, I'm just doing
we
it.
just announce it?
And Mayor and Council, I think this is an item on your agenda, so you're not closing or recessing the meeting, you're just recessing into closed session. So it's part of this agenda, and I think, Mayor, procedurally, you can just go ahead and recess us into the closed session.
I'm remiss. We are now going to recess into closed session in the large conference room.